The penthouse was silent except for the distant hum of Denver traffic far below. She stood at the window, her palm pressed against cold glass, watching city lights blur through the tears she refused to let fall. He was still talking, still explaining, still destroying everything with words wrapped in logic and reason. "I never want children, Margot." His voice came from somewhere behind her. "Not now. Not ever." Her hand moved to her stomach without thinking. The gesture so small, so instinctive, so completely invisible to the man who had just unknowingly rejected his own unborn children. She turned to face him, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. What if children were already part of the equation? His expression hardened into something she had never seen before. Cold. Certain. Immovable. Then someone would need to make a choice. "Because I will not change my mind on this. Not for anyone." And in that moment, standing in a penthouse worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, surrounded by every luxury money could buy, Margot realized she had never been poorer. Because the man she loved with every breath in her body had just called the babies growing inside her a problem to be solved. A choice to be made. A burden he refused to carry. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. The words that destroy us rarely announce themselves. They do not arrive with thunder or warning. They slip into ordinary moments, wearing familiar faces, speaking in voices we have memorized like prayers. And then they detonate, leaving nothing but silence and the slow realization that the person you loved most in the world never truly saw you at all. This is the story of a billionaire who declared he would never have children. Of a woman who fled into the night carrying his twins in her womb. And of the 4-year search that would teach a powerful man the difference between building an empire and building a home. Some stories begin with once upon a time. This one begins with a pregnancy test showing 2 pink lines, and a man who would reject them both before he even knew they existed. 8 months earlier, Margot had walked into a charity gala wearing a borrowed dress and nursing a broken heart. Her last relationship had ended badly, her art career was stalled, and she had only attended the event because her roommate had begged her to take the extra ticket. She had planned to stay for 1 hour. Smile politely. Drink exactly 1 glass of champagne. And then escape back to her small apartment where half-finished paintings waited for inspiration that never seemed to arrive. But then she had seen him across the room. Dominic stood near the silent auction tables, surrounded by people who clearly wanted his attention and his investment. He was tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything about him screamed money and power and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. She should have looked away. Instead, their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and something electric passed between them. He excused himself from his admirers without breaking eye contact. Crossed the room with purpose. Stopped directly in front of her with a smile that made her forget every reason she had come here planning to leave early. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," he said. She laughed, surprised by his directness. "That obvious? I have spent the last hour pretending to care about the yacht specifications of a man I will never see again." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You are the first genuine expression I have seen all night." I could not resist. That first conversation had lasted 3 hours. They had migrated from the ballroom to the terrace, then to a quiet restaurant down the street where neither of them ordered food but talked until the staff began stacking chairs around them. Dominic had been nothing like she expected. Yes, he was wealthy beyond comprehension. Yes, he ran a company that employed thousands and made decisions that moved markets. But he had also grown up in a small town in Montana, worked construction to pay for college, and built his empire from nothing through sheer determination and an almost frightening capacity for work. He asked her about her art. Really asked, leaning forward with genuine interest as she described the watercolor technique she was developing, the way she tried to capture the exact moment when morning light transformed ordinary scenes into something magical. Most people's eyes glazed over when she talked about her work. Dominic had looked at her like she was describing the secrets of the universe. Their first date was the following Tuesday. Dinner at a restaurant she could never afford, followed by a walk along the river where he had stopped under streetlight and kissed her for the first time. The second date was that weekend. A private tour of an art museum he had arranged just for her, the galleries empty and echoing as they wandered hand in hand through centuries of beauty. By the third date, she knew she was falling. By the 10th, she had fallen completely. The next 8 months unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Dominic was attentive, passionate, generous in ways that went far beyond money. He remembered every small thing she mentioned. Showed up with her favorite flowers just because. Cleared his brutal schedule to spend weekends with her, cooking together in his penthouse kitchen, watching old movies tangled on his couch, making love in the soft grey light of Denver mornings. He introduced her to his world gradually. Business dinners where he held her hand under the table. Weekend trips to places she had only seen in magazines. A life of privilege and possibility that she had never imagined for herself. But she had also introduced him to her world. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, where she taught him to pick the ripest tomatoes. Afternoons in her tiny studio apartment, where he sat quietly and watched her paint, his presence somehow making the colors flow more freely. Late nights sharing stories of their very different childhoods, learning each other's histories like sacred texts. She loved him. Completely. Terrifyingly. The kind of love that rewrote everything she thought she knew about herself. And she believed, with all her heart, that he loved her the same way. Which is why the morning the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, her first emotion was pure, overwhelming joy. Twins, the doctor confirmed later that day, her voice warm with professional delight. You are about 8 weeks along, and both heartbeats are strong. Congratulations, Ms. Sinclair. Both heartbeats. 2 babies. Dominic's children growing inside her at this very moment. She had floated through the rest of the day, planning how she would tell him. Tonight, she decided. At his penthouse, wearing the emerald dress he had bought her in Milan. She would wait for the right moment, and then she would share the most incredible news of their lives. She imagined his face transforming with wonder, his arms coming around her as he processed the magnitude of what she was saying. Maybe he would cry. Maybe he would laugh. Maybe he would simply hold her and whisper that this was everything he never knew he wanted. Because that was what this was. Everything. The beginning of their real life together. The family she had secretly dreamed of but never dared mention. She knew they had never discussed children. It simply had not come up. But love this strong, this consuming, surely meant they wanted the same things. Surely meant he would see these babies as the gift they were. By evening, she was standing at his penthouse window, wearing the emerald dress, watching the city lights scatter across the glass like fallen stars. Dominic emerged from his study with a devastating smile. Wine in hand. Completely unaware that the next few minutes would determine the course of both their lives. You are glowing tonight, he said, crossing toward her with that confident stride she had once found so attractive. Am I? She could hear the tremor in her own voice. The secret was burning inside her chest, desperate to be shared. He set down his wine glass and reached for her hands. His eyes were serious in a way that made her heart skip. Serena, there is something I need to discuss with you. Her breath caught. This was it. He was going to propose. The timing would be perfect. She could share her news right after, and they would celebrate the beginning of their forever. I have been thinking about us, he continued, leading her to the plush sofa that faced the windows. About our future. So have I, she whispered, her hand instinctively moving toward her stomach before she caught herself. He sat beside her, his blue eyes intense in the amber light. You know how much you mean to me. These past 8 months have been incredible. You have brought something into my life I did not know I was missing. Warmth flooded through her. This was exactly what she had imagined. The beginning of everything. But I need to be completely honest with you about something. His voice dropped, taking on a tone she recognized from the few business calls she had overheard. The voice he used when delivering verdicts. When closing doors that would never open again. I need you to understand my position on children. The word hit her like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. Maybe he was worried about timing. About readiness. She could reassure him. Tell him that love made people ready, that they would figure it out together. Margot. He took her hands in his, and his grip was firm. Certain. I never want children. Not now. Not ever. The penthouse went silent. Even the city beyond the windows seemed to hold its breath. Children would destroy everything I have built, he continued, his voice steady and measured. Everything I have worked for. They are a complication I cannot afford. A responsibility that would consume the life I have carefully constructed. She tried to speak, but her voice had abandoned her. I know society expects certain things. He warmed to his subject the way he did when explaining business strategies, unaware that each word was a knife twisting deeper. Marriage. Children. The whole domestic scenario. But I have seen what that does to people, Margot. My parents' marriage barely survived my childhood. My father's business suffered because he was constantly distracted by family obligations. I refused to make those mistakes. She pressed her hand against her stomach, suddenly feeling sick. The babies, their babies, were not even born yet, and their father was already rejecting them. The beauty of what we have, Dominic said, reaching for her hand again, is that we can love each other without those complications. We can travel, build our careers, enjoy life without the burden of raising children. We can be selfish with our time, our attention, our resources. Burden. He had called children a burden. She heard her own voice as if from a great distance. What if someone already? What if children were already part of the equation? Dominic's expression hardened into granite. Then that someone would need to make a choice. Me or them. Because I will not compromise on this, Margot. I will not pretend to want something that would fundamentally change who I am and what my life represents. The finality in his voice shattered something inside her chest. This was not a discussion. Not a negotiation. This was a declaration as unchangeable as the laws of physics. The man she loved with every breath in her body would never want their children. Would see them as obstacles. As complications. As weights he refused to carry. I see, she managed, proud that her voice did not break entirely. I knew you would understand. He smiled, that same devastating smile that had first stolen her heart at the charity gala. That is what I love about you. You are practical. Ambitious. You understand that some dreams are worth protecting, even if it means sacrificing others. But she was not practical. She was a woman who painted watercolor sunrises and cried at romantic movies and had been foolish enough to believe that love could conquer anything. She was a woman carrying twins who would never know their father's love because he had decided they did not deserve it before they had drawn their first breath. I should go, she said, standing on unsteady legs. Go. He frowned, genuine confusion crossing his face. But I made reservations at Carnley's. I thought we could celebrate. Celebrate what? The question escaped before she could stop it. Bitter and broken. Us. Our future. The fact that we want the same things. But they did not want the same things. They never had. She had just been too blinded by love to see it. I need some air. She was already moving toward the door. I will call you tomorrow. Margot, wait. But she was already gone. Fleeing down the hallway. Into the elevator. Away from the man who had just unknowingly rejected his own children. In the elevator's mirrored walls, she saw her reflection. Pale. Stricken. Her hand curved protectively over her stomach. Two hearts beating inside her, innocent and unaware that their father had already declared them unwanted. That night in her small apartment across town, Margot packed her life into 3 suitcases. She moved mechanically, her tears falling silently as she folded clothes and gathered essentials. Every photograph of them together went into a box. Every gift he had given her. Every reminder of the love that had turned to ash in the space of a single conversation. She left it all behind. At dawn, she drove west out of Denver as the first rays of sunlight painted the Rocky Mountains gold and pink. The colors were beautiful. She did not see them. All she could see was the road ahead. All she could feel was the weight of what she was leaving behind and the fierce, consuming need to protect the lives growing inside her. She did not leave a note. She did not say goodbye. She simply vanished, taking Dominic's children, the children he never wanted, to a place where they would be loved completely, unconditionally, by the one parent who already adored them. Behind her, Denver grew smaller in her rearview mirror. The penthouse where she had been so happy. The man who had made her believe in forever. The life she had imagined for herself. All of it disappearing like a dream upon waking. She drove for hours without stopping. When the tears finally slowed, she spoke aloud to the silence of the car. "You are wanted." Her voice was fierce despite its trembling. "Both of you. You are loved. You are miracles. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." The highway stretched ahead, leading her toward a future she could not yet imagine. She had no plan beyond getting far away. No destination beyond somewhere he would never think to look. But she had her children. 2 tiny hearts beating in rhythm with her own. 2 reasons to keep driving. To keep hoping. To keep believing that love, the right kind of love, could build something beautiful from the ruins of what she was leaving behind. Somewhere ahead, a small coastal town was waiting for her. A cottage with white shutters and a garden where small hands would learn to plant flowers. A life filled with laughter and bedtime stories and all the ordinary miracles of motherhood. She did not know any of this yet. All she knew was that she was running toward something, not just away. And that the words spoken in that penthouse, the words that had shattered everything, would echo through the next 4 years like a curse she could not escape. Some wounds never heal. They just learn to whisper instead of scream. 4 years later. The truth about obsession is that it wears persistence as a disguise. It calls itself determination. Whispers that the next town, the next weekend, the next desperate search might finally yield the answer you have been seeking. Dominic stood at the window of his corner office on the 52nd floor, watching Seattle's grey November skyline stretch toward a horizon as empty as his chest. The quarterly reports on his desk showed record profits. His latest acquisition had made international headlines. At 36, he commanded a business empire that most men only dreamed of. Forbes had called him ruthless. The Wall Street Journal had called him brilliant. None of it mattered. 4 years. 1,461 days since Margot had vanished from his life without explanation. Without a note. Without a single word to tell him why. He had called her phone until the number was disconnected. Gone to her apartment to find it empty, her landlord saying only that she had broken the lease and left no forwarding address. Her roommate claimed ignorance. Her few friends said nothing useful. Even the private investigators he hired, the best money could buy, had found no trace. Margot had simply disappeared. As completely as if she had never existed. And Dominic, the man who had never failed at anything, who had built a billion-dollar company through sheer force of will, had been unable to find one woman in a world of 7 billion people. So he had taken up the search himself. Every weekend for 4 years, he had driven to a different town along the Pacific coast. Portland, Astoria, Bend, Eugene, Cannon Beach, Seaside. Dozens of small communities that might have attracted an artist seeking affordable rent and quiet inspiration. He walked through farmers' markets and art galleries. Sat in coffee shops and bookstores. Studied every face in every crowd, listening for laughter that might be hers, watching for the flash of auburn hair that still invaded his dreams. His assistant had stopped questioning his Friday departures years ago. The board assumed he had developed some eccentric hobby. Only Dominic knew the truth. He was a man haunted by the ghost of a woman he had somehow lost without understanding why. And the not knowing was the worst part. That final night replayed in his mind constantly. Her strange expression when he had explained his position on children. The way she had asked about someone for whom children were already part of the equation. Had she been trying to tell him something? Had she been testing him somehow? In his darker moments, usually at 3 in the morning when sleep refused to come, he wondered if she had been pregnant. If that was what she had been trying to say before he had cut her off with his philosophy about burdens and complications. But no. She would have told him. She would have given him a chance to respond, to reconsider, to prove he was not the monster his words might have suggested. Would she not? This Saturday morning found him in Havenport, a sleepy coastal town 3 hours north of Portland that he had somehow missed in his earlier searches. The main street was lined with Victorian houses painted in cheerful colors. Art galleries displayed local work in windows fogged with autumn moisture. Coffee shops advertised locally roasted beans and live acoustic music. Exactly the kind of place Margot might have chosen to start over. He parked near the town square and began his familiar ritual. The coffee shop first, where he ordered black coffee and studied every face. Then the bookshop, with its maze of dusty shelves and handwritten recommendations. Then the elementary school playground, where families gathered on Saturday mornings for what looked like a community event. The playground was chaos. Children shrieking on swings. Parents organizing some kind of outdoor art project. The sounds of joy and frustration and the general mayhem of small humans navigating a world built for adults. Dominic found himself drawn to the cheerful disorder. Something about the scene tugged at memories he had tried to bury. Conversations with Margot about the life she dreamed of having someday. "I want a house with a garden," she had said once, curled against him in the darkness of his bedroom. "Somewhere our children could grow things." Our children. He had changed the subject, deflected with some joke about his black thumb, moved on to safer topics. Another moment he had failed to truly hear her. He walked along the fence that bordered the playground, his eyes moving systematically across the crowd. A habit now. A compulsion. Searching for the one face that would make 4 years of looking worthwhile. And then he saw her. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks. 4 years of disappointment had taught him to expect nothing but strangers wearing familiar features. How many times had he approached a woman with auburn hair only to find a stranger staring back? But this was different. This was Margot. She stood beside a picnic table covered with art supplies, her hair caught in a messy braid, wearing faded jeans and a sweater flecked with dried paint. She was laughing at something a small boy had said, her face radiant with the kind of joy he remembered from their early months together. She was more beautiful than his memory had dared preserve. 4 years had changed her in ways he struggled to process. She looked stronger somehow. More grounded. The hesitancy he remembered from their first meeting had been replaced by a quiet confidence that seemed to emanate from her very posture. He could not breathe. Could not move. Could only stand frozen at the edge of the playground, watching the woman who had haunted his every moment for 1,461 days. And then his world tilted completely. Because it was not just Margot standing at that art table. It was the 2 children beside her. 2 identical little boys with dark hair that waved exactly like his own. Grey eyes that mirrored his perfectly. One was bold and energetic, bouncing on his toes as he showed Margot his painting. The other was quieter, more watchful, carefully organizing paintbrushes with the serious concentration of someone who noticed everything. They were perhaps 4 years old. The timeline crashed through Dominic's mind with devastating clarity. 8 months together. 4 years apart. 2 children who looked exactly like him at that age. She had been pregnant. That night, when she asked about children already being part of the equation, she had been trying to tell him about the babies growing inside her. And he had cut her off. Declared his ultimatum. Made his position so brutally clear that she had fled into the night rather than subject their unborn children to a father who would see them as burdens. These were his sons. His children. The children he had rejected before they even existed. If this story is making your heart race, take a moment to hit that like button. And if you want to see how Dominic confronts the family he never knew he had, stay with me. This is just the beginning. Dominic stood at the edge of the playground, his legs refusing to carry him forward, his mind spinning with questions he had no answers for. Those boys. Those beautiful, perfect, impossible boys. They had his hair. His eyes. His bone structure. They moved with gestures he recognized from his own childhood photographs. And Margot was raising them alone. Had been raising them alone for 4 years while he searched every small town on the coast, never once considering that the woman he loved might have been carrying his children when she disappeared. The bold twin, the one who bounced on his toes while showing his painting, said something that made Margot laugh again. The sound carried across the playground like music, and Dominic felt something crack open in his chest. 4 years of that laugh. 4 years of those children growing and learning and becoming themselves. 4 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and first words and birthday candles. All of it happening without him. Because of what he had said. The quieter twin looked up suddenly, his grey eyes scanning the crowd with that watchful intensity. His gaze passed over Dominic, then snapped back. Held. Even from this distance, Dominic could see the curiosity in that small face. The way the boy tilted his head, studying this tall stranger at the fence with an expression that seemed far too perceptive for a 4-year-old. Then the boy turned back to his mother and said something Dominic could not hear. Margot looked up. Their eyes met across the playground, across 4 years of silence and separation, across all the words spoken and unspoken that had brought them to this moment. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The playground chaos continued around them, children laughing and parents chatting, all of it fading into background noise as two people who had once loved each other completely confronted the ruins of what might have been. Then Margot's hand moved to grip the shoulder of the boy beside her. Protective. Instinctive. The gesture of a mother preparing to shield her child from danger. And Dominic realized with devastating clarity that he was the danger she was protecting them from. He was the threat. He was the father who had declared these children burdens before they were born. The thought propelled him forward. He could not let her run again. Could not let another 4 years pass without knowing his sons, without trying to repair the damage his careless words had caused. But as he approached, forcing his legs to move despite the terror that gripped his chest, he saw Margot lean down and speak urgently to both boys. Saw them look toward him with curious but obedient eyes. Saw them gather their paintings and begin walking toward an elderly woman at another table. By the time he reached the art station, the children were gone. Only Margot remained, standing behind the table like a barrier, her chin lifted in defiance despite the fear flickering in her eyes. Dominic. His name on her lips was barely a whisper. 4 years of pain and surprise and something that might have been longing, all compressed into 3 syllables. I found you, he said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of this moment. After 4 years. I finally found you. She did not respond. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, body coiled as if preparing to flee. He stepped closer, close enough to see the freckles across her nose that he had once kissed, close enough to catch her familiar scent beneath the smell of paint and autumn air. Margot. Please. I need to understand. Why did you leave? Why did you disappear without a word? Her laugh was bitter, broken. You really do not know? He shook his head, genuine confusion mixing with the desperation that had driven him for 4 years. I have spent every weekend since you left searching for you. Every single weekend. Portland, Astoria, dozens of towns up and down the coast. I sold my company in Denver because I could not stand to be there without you. I moved to Seattle, thinking maybe you had gone north. I hired investigators. I did everything I could think of to find you. Her expression flickered with something, surprise perhaps, but she quickly masked it. You have been looking for me. For 4 years. Yes. Why? Because I love you. Because losing you destroyed me in ways I did not know I could be destroyed. Because I have spent every day since that night trying to understand what I did wrong, what I said that made you run. Margot's composure cracked. Her eyes grew bright with tears she was clearly fighting to contain. What you said that made me run. She shook her head slowly. Do you really not remember? I remember everything. He stepped around the edge of the table, unable to maintain the distance any longer. I remember telling you about my position on children. I remember you asking about someone for whom children were already part of the equation. I remember you leaving and never coming back. The tears spilled over despite her efforts. And you never connected those things? You never wondered why I asked that question? He opened his mouth to respond, but the truth of it crashed through him with the force of a tsunami. You were pregnant, he whispered. Yes. With my children. Yes. The twins. Those boys. They are your sons. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the gesture so familiar it made his heart ache. Eli and Jonah. They turned 4 in October. October. He had searched through October. Had driven through a dozen towns that month, watching families celebrate autumn and never knowing that his own children were celebrating a birthday somewhere without him. Why did you not tell me? The question hung between them, heavy with accusation and anguish. Margot's expression hardened. I tried to tell you, Dominic. That night. I asked you what would happen if children were already part of the equation. And you looked at me like I had suggested we burn down your empire. You gave me an ultimatum. You or them. Those were your exact words. I did not know you were. You did not want to know. Her voice rose, 4 years of suppressed pain breaking through. You had already decided. Children were burdens. Complications. Weights you refused to carry. You made your position absolutely clear. If I had known there were actual children. You would have what? She interrupted him, stepping back to maintain the distance he kept trying to close. Done your duty. Married me out of obligation. Raised children you resented because society expected it. She shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. I loved you too much to trap you in a life you did not want. And I loved our babies too much to subject them to a father who would always see them as mistakes. The word hit him like a physical blow. Mistakes. Is that what he would have seen them as? He thought of the boys he had watched from across the playground. The bold one with his enthusiastic paintings. The quiet one with his careful observation. Beautiful, perfect children who radiated the kind of joy that came from being completely loved. They are not mistakes, he said, his voice breaking on the words. They are miracles. Margot stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. You do not get to say that now. You do not get to appear after 4 years and suddenly decide you want to be their father. I know. You do not know anything. She was crying freely now, all pretense of composure abandoned. You do not know what it was like to be pregnant and alone. To work 2 jobs while so sick I could barely stand. To give birth to twins by myself because there was no one to hold my hand. Her voice broke completely. You do not know what it is like to watch your children ask why they are different from other families. Why they do not have a daddy who comes to their school plays. Why they have to make Father's Day cards for grandfather figures instead of an actual father. Every word was a knife, and Dominic accepted each wound as his due. What did you tell them? He asked quietly. About their father? Margot wiped her face again, her breathing ragged. I told them their daddy works very far away. That he loves them but cannot visit. I gave them a father who wanted them, even from a distance. It seemed kinder than the truth. Even in her anger. Even in her pain. She had been kind. Had given their sons a fictional father who loved them rather than exposing them to the real one who had rejected them before they were born. Margot. Do not. She held up her hand, stopping him. Do not stand there and say my name like you have any right to be here. From across the playground, a small voice called out. Mama. They both turned. The quiet twin, Eli, was walking toward them, his brother close behind. The elderly woman who had been watching them followed at a distance, concern evident in her expression. Eli reached the art table and looked up at Dominic with those impossibly familiar grey eyes. Mama, are you crying? I am fine, sweetheart. Margot quickly wiped her face, composing herself with the practiced ease of a mother who had learned to hide her pain. Just talking to an old friend. But Eli continued to study Dominic with that unnerving perceptiveness. You have sad eyes, he said quietly. Are you sad too? Dominic knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his son for the first time. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Not just the coloring, but the shape of his nose, the way his forehead creased slightly when he was thinking. A little bit, Dominic admitted. But meeting you is making me feel better. Eli tilted his head, considering this. I am Eli. That is my brother Jonah. He is louder than me, but I am older by 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Dominic thought of the birth he had missed. 4 minutes of difference between his first son and his second. 4 minutes that meant nothing and everything. Those are very good names, he managed. Mama picked them. Eli glanced at his mother, then back at Dominic. She is really good at picking things. She picked our house and our school and the colors for our room. She says we could not have a daddy to help pick things, so she had to pick extra carefully. The innocent words were another knife, but Dominic forced himself to stay focused on this child. This serious, observant child who was looking at him like he was trying to solve a very complicated puzzle. She sounds like a wonderful mama, Dominic said. She is the best mama. Eli nodded seriously. Jonah thinks so too, even though he is loud about it. As if summoned by his name, Jonah came bounding up to join them, his earlier shyness apparently forgotten in the way of children who burn through emotions at the speed of light. Are you going to help with the mural? He demanded without preamble. We are painting ocean things next week and I am really good at waves. Eli is better at clouds, but I am the best at waves. Dominic looked at Margot, seeking permission he knew he did not deserve. Her face was unreadable, but something in her posture had softened slightly. Perhaps the sight of her sons talking so naturally with this stranger had affected her more than she wanted to admit. "We should get going, boys," she said quietly. "We still have to stop at the grocery store." "But Mama," Jonah protested. "I want to show him my wave painting. It is really good." Ms. Rivera said it looked like real water. "Another time, maybe." The words were not quite a rejection. Not quite an invitation. Something in between that left a door cracked open, however slightly. Dominic stood slowly, his eyes still on the boys who had transformed his entire understanding of his own life. "It was nice to meet you," Eli said politely. "Your eyes are the same as ours," Jonah observed suddenly, tilting his head in a gesture identical to his brother's. "That is weird. How come your eyes are the same as ours?" The question hung in the air like a grenade. Margot's face went pale. The elderly woman who had been watching from a distance stepped closer, clearly ready to intervene. And Dominic felt the entire world narrow to this single moment, this single question from a 4-year-old who had noticed what adults might have overlooked. "Some people just have the same color eyes," Margot said quickly. "Like you and Eli have the same color. It happens sometimes. But ours is exactly the same." Jonah was not deterred. "Not just the color. The little sparkly parts too. I saw them when he got close." "Jonah, enough." There was an edge of desperation in Margot's voice now. "Say goodbye. We need to go." "But Mama." "Now, please." Jonah's face fell, but he obeyed his mother's tone if not her words. "Fine. Goodbye, man with the same eyes." "Goodbye," Eli added, his own gaze lingering on Dominic with that unsettling perception. Margot gathered both boys and began walking toward the parking lot, her spine rigid with tension. Dominic watched them go, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but stand in the middle of a playground while his entire world restructured itself around a truth he was only beginning to comprehend. Those were his sons. His family. Everything he had spent 4 years searching for, without even knowing he was searching for it. "Margot." She paused at the edge of the playground, her back still to him. "I am not leaving," he said. His voice carried across the distance between them, steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I am staying in town. However long it takes. Whatever you need me to prove. I am not disappearing." She did not turn around. Did not respond. But she did not run either. And as Dominic watched her walk away with his children, he made a silent promise to himself and to them. He would earn this. He would prove himself worthy of these boys, worthy of their mother, worthy of the family he had unknowingly rejected 4 years ago. The words that had shattered everything could not be unsaid. But perhaps, with enough time and enough proof, they could be overcome. Some wounds never fully heal. But some wounds, given enough love and patience, can become the foundation for something stronger than what existed before. Dominic did not know if that was possible here. Did not know if Margot would ever trust him again, or if his sons would ever know him as their father. All he knew was that he had finally found what he had been searching for, and he would spend the rest of his life proving he deserved to keep it. The cottage at the end of Lighthouse Road had white shutters and window boxes overflowing with the last chrysanthemums of autumn. A white picket fence surrounded a garden where small footprints had worn paths between vegetable beds and flower patches. Wind chimes hung from the porch, singing soft melodies in the ocean breeze. It was everything Margot had once described wanting. A house with a garden where children could grow things. Dominic sat in his rental car across the street, watching the lights come on inside as evening settled over Havenport. Through the kitchen window, he could see shadows moving. Margot preparing dinner. The boys doing something at the table, homework perhaps, or art projects. A family. His family. Living a life he had no part in. He had checked into the only inn in town, a charming bed and breakfast run by a woman named Patricia who seemed to know everyone and everything that happened in Havenport. She had looked at him with curiosity when he said he was staying indefinitely. Had asked pointed questions about his business in town that he had deflected with vague answers about needing a quiet place to work. But small towns had long memories and sharp eyes. It would not be long before everyone knew who he was and why he was here. The question was whether Margot would let him stay long enough for any of it to matter. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop sitting outside my house. You are scaring the neighbors. If you want to talk, Come to the coffee shop on Main Street tomorrow at 9. The boys will be at school. He stared at the message, his heart hammering. She was willing to talk. It was more than he had dared hope for. The coffee shop was called the Lighthouse Roast, a cozy establishment with mismatched furniture and local artwork covering every available wall. Dominic arrived at 8:45, ordered black coffee, and chose a table in the back corner where they could speak privately. Margot arrived at exactly 9, wearing jeans and a soft grey sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The exhaustion of a single mother who had carried everything alone for too long. She ordered tea and sat across from him without greeting. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You sold your company," she said finally. "It was not a question." "Yes." "When?" "2 weeks after I found you." Her expression flickered with surprise. "That company was your life. Your identity. You built it from nothing." "I built a lot of things from nothing." Dominic wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, grateful for something to hold. "But I have spent the last 4 years learning that building things means nothing if you have no one to share them with." Pretty words. True words. He met her eyes, willing her to see the sincerity beneath the surface. "I am not the man I was 4 years ago, Margot. Losing you changed me in ways I am still trying to understand." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "You did not lose me. You threw me away. There is a difference." The words landed like blows, but he did not flinch. "You are right. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too arrogant and too afraid to see what I was being offered. I gave you an ultimatum that no person should ever have to face. And then I spent 4 years paying for it, searching for a woman I did not deserve to find." Margot was quiet for a long moment. Her tea sat untouched before her. "What do you want, Dominic?" Her voice was weary. "Why are you really here?" "I want to know my sons." The answer came immediately, without hesitation. "I want to be part of their lives. I want to teach them to ride bikes and help with homework and be there for the moments that matter. I want to earn the right to call myself their father." "And me?" She looked at him directly now, her eyes guarded but searching. "What do you want from me?" "I want whatever you are willing to give." He held her gaze. "I know I have no right to ask for anything beyond time with the boys. I know trust has to be earned. I know that words mean nothing without actions to back them up." He leaned forward slightly. "So I am going to stay here. In this town. For as long as it takes. I am going to show up every day and prove that I am not the man who said those things 4 years ago. And if you never forgive me, if you never want anything from me beyond a co-parenting relationship, I will accept that. But I will not disappear again." Margot studied him for a long time. He could see the war playing out behind her eyes. The fear of trusting him again battling against something else. Hope, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of doing everything alone. "They do not know," she said quietly, "about you. They think their father works far away. I know. If you are going to be part of their lives, we do it slowly. On my terms. Of course. You stay at the inn. You do not come to the house unless I invite you. You do not make promises to them that you cannot keep. I understand. And if you hurt them..." Her voice hardened. "If you make them love you and then disappear, I will never forgive you. I will spend the rest of my life making sure they know exactly who abandoned them. I would deserve that." He nodded slowly. "But it will not happen. I am not going anywhere." She picked up her tea and took a long sip, her expression unreadable. "We will see." It was not trust. Not even close to forgiveness. But it was a beginning. The first week was awkward. Painful. Full of moments where Dominic had to bite back the urge to claim what was his and instead accept the crumbs Margot was willing to offer. She introduced him to the boys as an old friend who was visiting town. They accepted this with the easy flexibility of children who had not yet learned to question adult explanations. Jonah immediately demanded to know if Dominic could play catch because Uncle Marcus was really bad at it and kept throwing the ball over his head. Eli hung back, watching with those observant grey eyes that missed nothing. Dominic discovered that Uncle Marcus was actually Marcus Reeves, a local veterinarian who had been helping Margot for years. A good man by all accounts. one of several community members who had stepped up to provide male role models for boys growing up without a father. The thought should have made him grateful. Instead, it filled him with a jealousy so fierce he had to work to keep it from showing. Other men had been teaching his sons to throw balls. Other men had been reading them stories and showing them how to tie shoes. Other men had been there for 4 years while he sat in Seattle boardrooms, completely unaware that his children existed. But he forced the jealousy down. These people had supported Margot when she was alone and pregnant, had helped her raise twins on a single income, had loved his sons when their actual father was too blind and selfish to know they needed him. He owed them gratitude, not resentment. The second week was slightly better. Margot allowed him to join them for dinner at the cottage. The boys were more comfortable with him now, especially Jonah, who had apparently decided that anyone willing to play catch for 3 hours straight was worth befriending. Eli remained cautious, polite but distant, those grey eyes watching, waiting, evaluating. He reminded Dominic of himself at that age. Always thinking, always calculating, always trying to figure out the rules of whatever situation he found himself in. After dinner, while Margot cleaned up and Jonah showed Dominic his extensive collection of rocks from the beach, Eli approached with a book in his hands. "Will you read to me?" The question was quiet, almost shy. Dominic looked at the book. A worn copy of something about a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. "I would love to." They settled on the couch, Eli tucked against Dominic's side like he had been sitting there his whole life. The weight of his small body, the warmth of him, the complete trust in the way he leaned in to see the pictures. It was almost more than Dominic could bear. He read the story 3 times because Eli asked him to. Then he answered questions about how caterpillars knew it was time to make cocoons and whether butterflies remembered being caterpillars and if people could turn into butterflies too if they tried hard enough. By the time Margot announced bedtime, something had shifted. Not everything. Not even most things. But something. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to hit that like button. And stay with me. The moment that changes everything is coming, and you will not want to miss it. The third week brought a routine that began to feel almost normal. Dominic would arrive at the cottage each morning after the boys left for school. He would help Margot with whatever needed doing around the house. Fixing the loose step on the back porch. Repainting the garden shed. Installing the shelves she had been meaning to put up for months. Physical work. Quiet work. The kind of work that did not require much conversation but built something nonetheless. In the afternoons, he would pick the boys up from school. A privilege Margot had granted after 2 weeks of proving himself reliable. He would drive them home, help with homework, play in the yard until dinner. Evenings were family time. Meals together at the small kitchen table. Stories before bed. The domestic rhythms he had once dismissed as complications that would consume his life. He had been right about one thing. This life was consuming. It consumed his mornings and his evenings. His thoughts and his energy. His old ideas about success and fulfillment and what made a life worth living. But consumption, he discovered, could be a kind of salvation. Jonah opened up first, as Dominic had expected. This son wore his heart on his sleeve, offering love freely and expecting it to be returned. Within weeks, he was climbing onto Dominic's lap without invitation, demanding piggyback rides, falling asleep against his shoulder during movie nights. Eli took longer. But Dominic was patient. He had spent 4 years searching. He could spend however long it took earning trust. He noticed that Eli loved the stars. Had books about constellations and planets stacked beside his bed. Drew rockets and moons in the margins of his schoolwork. So Dominic bought a telescope. A good one, with a stand sturdy enough for small hands to operate. He set it up in the cottage backyard one clear November night and waited. Eli emerged from the house in his pajamas, drawn by curiosity. "What is that?" "A telescope." Dominic knelt beside the instrument, adjusting the lens. "Want to see the moon up close?" The wonder on Eli's face when he looked through the eyepiece was worth more than anything Dominic had ever earned in his entire career. "I can see the craters," Eli whispered. "The actual craters. They look like bowls. That is where asteroids hit the surface millions of years ago." Dominic adjusted the angle slightly. Each crater tells a story about something that happened before people even existed. Eli pulled back from the telescope, his eyes wide. Can we see other planets too? They stayed outside for 2 hours, until Margot called them in with threats of permanent grounding if Eli caught cold. Dominic carried his sleepy son, his son, inside and tucked him into bed while Margot watched from the doorway. That night, as he was leaving, she stopped him on the porch. Thank you. For what? For the telescope. For being patient with him. For showing up every day even when he was not ready to let you in. Dominic shoved his hands in his pockets, suddenly unsure what to do with them. He is worth waiting for. They both are. Margot was quiet for a moment. The porch light caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I know I have not made this easy. You should not make it easy. He shook his head. I do not deserve easy. I deserve exactly this, having to prove myself every single day until you believe I have changed. And have you changed? He considered the question seriously. I have learned what I was too afraid to understand before. That the things I was protecting, my time, my career, my carefully constructed life, none of it mattered. I built an empire and lost the only person who made me feel like more than a collection of accomplishments. He met her eyes. I spent 4 years alone, Margot. 4 years in a penthouse that felt like a mausoleum. 4 years of success that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. And now I am here, and I get to watch our sons do homework and fight over who gets the blue cup at dinner, and it is the happiest I have ever been. Margot looked away, but not before he saw her eyes brighten with tears. I should go, he said quietly. The boys have that field trip tomorrow. Early morning. Right. She stepped back, creating distance. Good night, Dominic. Good night. He was halfway to his car when her voice stopped him. Dominic. He turned. The telescope was a good idea. She was silhouetted in the doorway, her expression unreadable. He told Jonah before bed that he thinks you might be okay. Might be okay, Dominic repeated. I will take it. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. It is more than most people get from Eli. He drove back to the inn with warmth spreading through his chest. Might be okay. It was not much. But it was everything. The first month passed. Then the second. The routine became ritual. The distance between Dominic and his sons closed inch by inch, story by story, telescope session by telescope session. Jonah started calling him by name instead of the man with the same eyes. Eli started saving jokes to tell him at dinner. Both boys began looking for his car when the school bell rang, disappointment flickering across their faces on the rare days he was not there. Margot noticed. Of course she noticed. She was a mother who had spent 4 years paying attention to everything. And slowly, carefully, she began to let him closer. Movie nights became a regular thing. Sunday breakfasts at the cottage. Grocery shopping trips where the boys argued over cereal brands while Dominic pushed the cart and Margot pretended to be exasperated by all of them. It felt like family. Not the clean, simple family of storybooks. But something messier and more real. Something being built day by day from the wreckage of what came before. One evening, after the boys were in bed, Margot invited Dominic to stay for tea. They sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets against the December chill, watching stars appear one by one overhead. Eli showed me his latest constellation map today, Dominic said. He has memorized the entire winter sky. He wants to be an astronaut. Or an astrophysicist. Or possibly a star. He has not quite worked out that last one is not a career option. Dominic laughed. The sound surprised him. He could not remember the last time he had laughed like this. Easy. Unguarded. And Jonah. Jonah wants to be a professional rock collector / dinosaur finder / possibly a pirate. Naturally. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. You are good with them, Margot said quietly. I did not expect that. Neither did I. She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. What changed? I mean, I understand what you have said about learning and growing. But I spent 8 months with you, Dominic. You were adamant about never wanting children. Not ambivalent. Adamant. What shifted so completely that now you are here, spending every day with 2 4-year-olds, and it seems like exactly where you want to be? Dominic took a long breath. You want the truth? I always want the truth. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When you left, I thought I was relieved. Not immediately. At first I was confused, worried. But after a few weeks of looking for you and coming up empty, there was this small voice in my head that said, well, maybe this is for the best. She was probably going to want all those things you cannot give. Children. Domesticity. A life you are not built for. Margot's expression flickered with pain. For about a month, I believed that voice. I threw myself back into work. Closed deals. Built the company bigger and faster than ever before. Told myself this was who I was. This was what I was meant for. And then I woke up one morning, and I could not breathe. Dominic stared at the stars overhead. Not metaphorically. Literally could not breathe. My chest was so tight I thought I was having a heart attack. I called an ambulance. They ran every test. Nothing was wrong with my heart. What was wrong? I was empty. He looked at her. Completely, terrifyingly empty. I had everything I had ever worked for. The money, the power, the respect, all of it. And I felt nothing. Less than nothing. Like a shell walking around pretending to be a person. His voice grew rougher. The doctors called it a panic attack. But I knew what it really was. It was the absence of you. The absence of everything you represented. A life of meaning instead of just achievement. Margot did not respond. Her eyes were bright in the porch light. That was when I started looking for you in earnest. Not just because I missed you, though I did, but because finding you became the only thing that felt real. The only goal that actually mattered. He turned to face her fully. I spent 4 years learning what I had thrown away. 4 years of empty penthouses and hollow victories and weekends driving through small towns hoping to see your face. And then I found you. I found them. And for the first time in years, I could breathe again. Margot was crying now. Silent tears sliding down her cheeks. I was so angry at you, she whispered. For so long. You cannot imagine. I know. I wanted you to suffer. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. In my worst moments, I wanted you to feel even a fraction of what I felt that night. Alone and pregnant and completely shattered by the person I loved most in the world. I did suffer. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear. It does not compare to what you went through. I know that. But Margot, I suffered every day you were gone. She closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his touch. I wanted to hate you forever. And now I do not know what I want. She opened her eyes. That is the truth. I look at you with my sons, our sons, and I see a man I do not recognize. A man who is patient and present and everything I once dreamed you could be. But I am terrified. She pulled back, wrapping the blanket more tightly around herself. I spent 4 years protecting my heart. For years telling myself that love was not worth the risk. What if I let you back in and you remember who you used to be? What if the novelty wears off and you wake up one morning resenting the life you have chosen? Then you will hate me, and rightfully so. Dominic's voice was steady despite the emotion churning in his chest. But Margot, that is not going to happen. I have spent every day for the last 2 months immersed in this life. The chaos and the exhaustion and the endless demands of 2 small people who need everything. And I have never been happier. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. I am not going anywhere. Not ever. Whatever you decide about us, about the future, I will be here for those boys. I will show up every single day. I will prove with actions what words cannot convey. Margot looked at their joined hands. The boys adore you. You know that. I know. Eli asked me last week if you were going to be around forever or if you were going to leave like other people's daddies do. What did you tell him? She was quiet for a long moment. I told him I did not know. That we were still figuring things out. That sometimes adults need time to make big decisions. That seems fair. She looked up at him. He told me he hopes you stay. That he has been practicing telling you important things because he wants you to know all about him. The words hit Dominic with unexpected force. Eli, his cautious, watchful son, was practicing sharing himself. preparing to open up to a man he barely knew but somehow sensed was important. "I want to know everything," Dominic said quietly. "Every detail of their lives. Every story I missed. I want to hear about their first words and their first steps and every single thing that happened while I was too blind to know they existed." Margot smiled through her tears. "That would take a very long time. I have nothing but time." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "We should get some sleep. The boys have a school assembly tomorrow. They are very excited about the songs they have been practicing. I will be there." "I know." She stood, and he followed her to the door. "Good night, Dominic." "Good night." He was almost to his car when she called out, "Dominic." He turned. "I am glad you found us." The words were soft, almost lost in the night air. "I did not think I would ever say that. But I am glad." "So am I, Margot. More than you will ever know." She disappeared inside, and he drove back to the inn with something that felt dangerously like hope blooming in his chest. They were not there yet. But they were getting closer. If you are feeling this story deep in your soul, drop a comment and tell me what you think will happen next. And make sure that subscribe button is clicked because this family is about to face the biggest test of their lives. 3 months had passed since Dominic first walked into Margot's garden. Christmas had come and gone, a magical chaos of wrapping paper and excited shrieks and the boys' faces when they saw the art supplies and science kits and yes, more telescope attachments that Dominic had carefully selected. New Year had brought quiet reflection, a midnight moment on the cottage porch where Dominic and Margot had stood side by side watching fireworks over the harbor, not touching but close enough that he could feel her warmth. January meant routines. School schedules. Homework help. The comfortable rhythm of a family that was not quite a family but was definitely something more than it had been. Dominic had moved out of the inn and into a small rental house 3 blocks from the cottage. Close enough to be present. Far enough to respect the boundaries Margot still maintained. But the walls between them were crumbling. Slowly. Inexorably. One shared moment at a time. Some nights, after the boys were asleep, they would sit on her porch and talk for hours. About their childhoods. Their dreams. The years apart and the people they had become. About everything except the thing that hung unspoken between them. Other nights, their hands would brush while doing dishes. Their eyes would meet across the dinner table. The tension would build until Dominic thought he might break from wanting to touch her. But he waited. He would wait forever if that was what it took. And then, in late January, everything changed. The call came at 2 in the morning. Dominic was asleep in his rental house, dreaming of nothing in particular, when his phone shattered the silence. Margot's voice came through, strangled with panic. "It is Eli. Something is wrong. He cannot breathe. His inhaler is not working. I am taking him to the hospital. I do not know what to do." Dominic was already out of bed, grabbing clothes. "Which hospital?" "Havenport General. 30 minutes away. They told me to keep him calm, but he is so scared and Jonah woke up and he is crying and I cannot be in 2 places at once." "I am coming." Dominic was already running to his car. "I will meet you there. Hurry. Please hurry." The line went dead. The drive to the hospital was the longest 30 minutes of Dominic's life. Rain slashed against the windshield. The roads were slick and treacherous. His mind raced with images of Eli, his quiet, observant son, gasping for breath, terrified, his small body fighting against something he could not control. He thought of all the nights he had not been there. All the illnesses and injuries and fears that Margot had handled alone. All the moments when his sons had needed a father and there had been none. Not this time. This time he would be there. He pulled into the hospital parking lot to find Margot's car parked crookedly across 2 spaces, the driver door still open, evidence of how quickly she had fled. The emergency room was chaos. Bright lights and urgent voices and the smell of antiseptic that clung to everything. Dominic pushed through the doors and found the pediatric wing, his heart hammering against his ribs. Margot was in the waiting area, Jonah asleep in her lap, her face streaked with tears. When she saw Dominic, something in her expression cracked. "You came. Where else would I be?" He crossed to her in 3 strides and knelt beside her chair, one hand on Jonah's back, the other reaching for her. "What did they say?" "Asthma attack. A bad one. They are giving him medication, trying to get his breathing stabilized. But he was so scared, Dominic. He kept asking for me and I could not stay because they were doing procedures and I had Jonah and... She broke down completely. Dominic pulled her close, Jonah still between them, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. You did everything right, he murmured into her hair. You got him here. He is getting the care he needs. You did everything right. I was so scared. I am still so scared. I know. But he is strong. And he has you. And I am here now. I am not leaving. They waited together through the longest hours of Dominic's life. Jonah woke eventually, confused and frightened. Dominic held him, told him stories, promised that his brother would be okay. The fierce protectiveness that surged through him was unlike anything he had experienced in business or life or anything before this. These were his sons. His family. And nothing in the world was more important than keeping them safe. At 4 a.m, a doctor emerged. Mrs. Sinclair. Margot stood so quickly she nearly lost her balance. Dominic steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Your son is stable. The doctor's voice was calm, reassuring. The attack was severe, but we got his breathing under control. He is resting now. You can see him. The relief that flooded through Dominic nearly brought him to his knees. Can we both go in? Margot asked, glancing at Dominic. The doctor hesitated. He is the children's father, Margot said quietly. It was the first time she had called him that in anyone else's hearing. The first time she had claimed him as part of their family structure. Dominic felt the words settle into his chest like a homecoming. Of course. The doctor nodded. Follow me. Eli looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped softly. His dark hair was matted with sweat. His face was pale. But his eyes opened when they entered. Mama. I am here, baby. Margot rushed to his side, taking his small hand. I am right here. Eli's gaze moved past her to Dominic, standing in the doorway with Jonah asleep in his arms. You came too. Of course I came. Dominic moved closer, careful not to jostle Jonah. I will always come when you need me. Eli's eyes filled with tears. I was scared. I know. I could not breathe and I thought maybe I would die and then I would never get to show you the new constellation I found. The words, delivered with 4-year-old solemnity, broke something open in Dominic's chest. You are going to show me every constellation. He set Jonah down carefully in a chair and moved to Eli's bedside. Every single one. And we are going to get you a better inhaler and make sure this never happens again. Okay. Okay. Eli reached out with his free hand, the one not held by Margot, and wrapped his fingers around Dominic's. The three of them stayed like that as dawn painted the hospital windows. A family forged in crisis. Bound by something stronger than blood. Jonah woke an hour later, demanded to be lifted onto the bed beside his brother, and promptly fell asleep again with his arm across Eli's chest. Dominic and Margot stood together at the foot of the bed, watching their son sleep. Thank you, she whispered. For coming. For being here. For everything. You do not have to thank me. These are my children. You are. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You are everything to me. There is nowhere else I would be. She looked at him, her eyes red from crying, her face exhausted but beautiful. I know. Something passed between them. An acknowledgement of what had been building for months. What could no longer be denied. We should talk, she said quietly. When this is over. When Eli is home and healthy. We should talk about what happens next. Dominic nodded. Whenever you are ready. She leaned against him. Just slightly. Just enough. I think I am almost there. They stayed at the hospital until Eli was discharged that afternoon. The boys fell asleep in the car, and Dominic carried them inside one at a time while Margot prepared the couch with blankets and pillows for a movie marathon. By evening, Eli was feeling well enough to argue with his brother about which dinosaur movie to watch. Margot made chicken soup. Dominic handled bath time and bedtime stories and all the small tasks that made up the fabric of family life. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. It was the most fulfilling night of his existence. After the boys were finally asleep, He and Margot collapsed on the couch, too tired to move, too wired to sleep. "That was intense," she said. "That was parenthood," he replied. She laughed. A real laugh, tired but genuine. "You handled it well. Better than I expected. I spent 30 years learning how to manage crises." He shrugged. Board meetings. Hostile takeovers. The occasional market crash. But nothing was as terrifying as seeing Eli in that hospital bed. "Welcome to parenthood." He turned to face her. "Margot." She looked at him, her expression soft and vulnerable in the lamplight. "I love you." The words came out without planning, without strategy. Just truth. "I have loved you for 5 years. I loved you when I was too afraid to admit it. I loved you every day you were gone. I love you now, watching you be the most incredible mother I have ever seen. I love you in ways I do not have words for." Margot's breath caught. "I do not need you to say anything back." He rushed to continue. "I do not need anything from you except the chance to keep proving myself. But I needed you to know. After tonight. After almost losing Eli. I needed you to know that this is not just about the boys. It is about you. It has always been about you. Dominic. I know the words are not enough. I know I have to keep showing you. But She kissed him. The touch of her lips silenced everything. Every fear. Every doubt. Every careful strategy for how this conversation was supposed to go. She kissed him, and 4 years of separation melted into nothing. When she finally pulled back, her forehead resting against his, her breathing unsteady, she whispered 4 words that changed everything. "I love you too." Dominic closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "I never stopped," she continued. "I tried to. God, I tried. But every time I looked at our sons, I saw you. And every time I imagined the future, you were in it. Even when I hated you. Even when I told myself I would never forgive you. Some part of me was always waiting for you to find us." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "I will never stop earning this," he promised. "Every day for the rest of my life. I will prove I am worthy of you. Of them. I believe you." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with tears and something else. Something that looked like hope. "So what happens now?" "Now." He smiled. "Now we take it one day at a time. Now we build something real. Now I keep showing up until you get so tired of seeing my face that you have no choice but to let me stay forever." She laughed again, and the sound was healing. Forever is a long time. Not long enough. They talked until nearly dawn, curled together on the couch like they had 5 years ago when everything seemed possible. They talked about the future. About the boys. About what it meant to build a life together after everything that had come before. When the first light of morning crept through the windows, Dominic finally understood what he had been searching for all along. Not success. Not power. Not the validation of the business world. This. A woman who loved him despite everything. 2 boys who needed him to be their father. A family that was imperfect and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. The words he had spoken 4 years ago in a Denver penthouse would never be unsaid. But they could be overcome. And that was exactly what he intended to do. 3 months later, spring had painted Havenport in shades of renewal. The cottage garden bloomed with flowers Margot had planted. The porch swing Dominic had built creaked gently in the ocean breeze. And 2 5-year-old boys raced through the yard chasing butterflies with the joyful abandon of children who knew, with absolute certainty, that they were loved. Today was their 5th birthday. But Dominic had something more than cake and presents in mind. The backyard had been transformed overnight. White lights strung between the trees. Flowers everywhere. A fairy tale setting for a fairy tale moment. The boys, blissfully unaware, played with friends from school while the adults gathered and the afternoon sun began its descent toward the ocean. Dominic found Margot in the kitchen, putting finishing touches on the birthday cake. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. She glanced down at her simple blue dress. "It is just a family party." "I know." He stepped closer. "And you look beautiful." Something in his tone made her pause. "What are you up to?" "Who, me?" "Dominic." Her eyes narrowed. What are you planning? Before he could answer, Jonah came crashing through the door. Mama, come outside. There is a surprise. A surprise? Margot looked at Dominic. You told them? They helped plan it. He grinned. You should see how well Jonah kept a secret. I was genuinely impressed. Margot allowed herself to be led outside, where the party guests had gathered in a circle and the boys stood with Dominic near the old oak tree. The fairy lights caught the late afternoon sun. The flowers filled the air with sweetness. And 50 people who loved this family stood waiting for what came next. Dominic took Margot's hands. Almost 6 years ago, I met a woman at a charity gala who changed everything about how I saw the world. She was beautiful and kind and full of the kind of passion I had trained myself to suppress. I fell in love with her before I even knew what was happening. Margot's eyes were already glistening. And then I lost her. Because I was too afraid of what love might cost me. Too focused on protecting myself from the complications of actually living. He squeezed her hands. I spent 4 years paying for that fear. 4 years learning what it meant to be empty. 4 years searching for a woman I did not deserve to find. He glanced at the boys, who were watching with barely contained excitement. When I found her again, I found something I never knew I was missing. 2 incredible boys who taught me what really matters. A family that accepted me even though I had done nothing to earn it. A woman who loved me enough to let me prove I had changed. He dropped to one knee. Margot covered her mouth with her hand. I do not have the right words for what you mean to me. For what our sons mean to me. For what this life means to me. But I have the rest of my life to try and find them. He pulled out a small velvet box. Margot, will you marry me? The crowd held its breath. Eli tugged on her dress. Say yes, Mama. We already asked him to be our daddy and he said yes, but only if you said yes too. Jonah nodded vigorously. We practiced keeping the secret. It was really hard. Eli almost told you like 6 times. Margot laughed through her tears. She looked at Dominic, at the man who had broken her heart and then spent 3 months putting it back together piece by piece. Yes. The word rang out across the garden. Yes, I will marry you. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The boys launched themselves at their parents, all 4 of them collapsing into a tangle of hugs and laughter and happy tears. We are a real family now, Jonah announced to everyone listening. A forever family. Forever, Eli agreed solemnly. That means nobody leaves. Dominic pulled back to look at his sons, these perfect beings he had almost never known. Forever, he confirmed. I promise. The party that followed was everything a celebration should be. Music and dancing and more cake than any child should reasonably consume. Friends who had become family. Neighbors who had helped Margot survive. A community that had embraced them all. As evening fell and the guests began to leave, Dominic and Margot stood on the porch, watching fireflies dance through the darkening garden. The boys were inside, helping Margot's friend clean up, their excited chatter drifting through the open windows. I still cannot believe this is my life, Margot said quietly. Better or worse than you imagined? She considered. Different. When I left Denver, I thought I knew what my future would look like. Single mother. Struggling artist. Maybe finding someone eventually, but never like this. Never the same person who had broken me. She turned to face him. But you are not the same person. That is what took me so long to understand. The man who said those things in the penthouse, he does not exist anymore. I am not sure he ever really existed. Dominic shook his head. I think he was a mask I wore because I was too afraid to be real. And now I am terrified every day. He laughed. Terrified of messing up. Terrified of not being good enough. Terrified of everything that could go wrong. But I would not trade a single moment of that terror for the safety I used to have. Not 1 second. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I love you, Dominic Thorne. I love you, Margot Sinclair. Soon to be Margot Thorne. She smiled. Soon. They stood together as the stars appeared overhead, one by one, the same stars Dominic had shown their son through a telescope that felt like a lifetime ago. Some stories begin with once upon a time. This one had begun with words that shattered everything. But it was ending with a family whole again. With a man who had learned what truly mattered. With a woman brave enough to forgive. With two boys who had taught their father the meaning of love. "Is this our happy ending?" Eli asked, appearing in the doorway with Jonah beside him. Margot and Dominic exchanged a look. "No, sweetheart," Dominic said, opening his arms for the boys to join them on the porch. "This is not our happy ending." "Then what is it?" Jonah demanded. Dominic lifted both boys, settling one on each hip, their weight comfortable and perfect against him. "This is our happy beginning." The stars continued to appear overhead. The ocean whispered against the shore. And somewhere in a small coastal town, a family that had been broken beyond repair discovered that love, the right kind of love, could heal almost anything. Some words shatter worlds. But some words, spoken with enough courage and enough time, can rebuild them. And sometimes, the family you never knew you wanted turns out to be the only thing you ever really needed. The end. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And if you want more stories of love, redemption, and the families that find us when we least expect them, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. I will be here with another tale soon. Until then, remember that it is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Never too late to say the words you should have said. Never too late to fight for the love that matters most. Thank you for listening, my beloved family. I will see you in the next one.